My name is Amos Campbell, and today is my dissertation defense here at Temple University. The topic I looked at was the impact of violence in co-educational institutions. The question this raises is, why does there appear to be more violence in co-educational schools than in single-sex schools in Jamaica? Before going further with the topic, I will just share with us what qualifies the researcher to do this topic. Well, I am a graduate of Western Carolina University. That was where I did my master's in education leadership. I am also a graduate of the Jamaica Theological Seminary. That was where I did my first degree with emphasis on guidance and counseling. I also achieved an associate diploma in teaching at Jamaica Theological Seminary. I'm a graduate of Bethlehem Teachers College. I did a diploma in teaching there as well. A graduate of Regent College of the Caribbean, formerly Jamaica Bible College. I did theology there. I also studied with Michael University. I did technology in secondary education at Michael. I also studied with the University of the West Indies, where my focus was on supervisory management. In terms of experience, I have been an educator in the secondary school system for more than 2 decades, a pastor for just under 3 decades, marriage officer and family counselor. I also lecture at the undergraduate level. I will talk about the reality and history of violence in Jamaica before going into the meat of the matter. On screen right now is a picture of a young man who was stabbed by one of his schoolmates at school. His name was Chevon Johnson. This was aired on national television, and we will go back to that clip now.
There was tragedy at the Dunoon Technical High School on International Children's Day. A boy stabbed his schoolmate to death on the compound. The victim is Chevon Johnson. His attacker is in police custody. Kirk Wright visited the school.
News of Chevon's death reached the school about an hour after he was rushed to hospital. Administrators called the student body together to address them before dismissing classes for the day. The police came during that time to collect statements. We tried to hear from the principal about what happened, but her secretary came back to say she would send out a press release. We have still not received it. Earlier, media reports stated that Chevon was killed during an argument over a girl.
Well, that is very sad, but it is the reality of what goes on in schools, or at least in some schools in Jamaica. The purpose of this study was to investigate the relationship between school structure and incidences of violence. As we can see in that movie, that is what makes this research of great importance to the school system in Jamaica. The research was guided by 2 major research questions. One, how do the administrators and the teachers of co-educational schools in Jamaica perceive violence among students? And 2, how do the administrators and the teachers in co-educational schools, as compared to those in same-sex schools, explain violence within their schools? Now, there was a theoretical foundation used, and it was the theory of symbolic interaction. This was first put forward by Herbert Mead in 1967. He held that through interaction with others, humans identify meaning or naming, and then they develop discourse. This was further developed by Wood, 2009. He said, It is through communication that we learn who we are and what it means to be in our culture. Children learn behavior from all who they come in contact with. Now, that behavior may be advantageous or it may be atrocious. In terms of the review of literature, the World Health Organization sees violence as the intentional use of force, physical force or power, threatened or actual against oneself, another person, or against a group or community that either results in or has a high likelihood of resulting in injury, death, psychological harm, maldevelopment, or deprivation. Violence and aggression continue to be the major causes of trauma within some schools. These incidents usually result in violent acts that are sometimes fatal, as in the case of Chevon Johnson, affecting the school community and causing major disruption. And this was put out by the Ministry of Education and Youth 2007. We looked at literature relating to violence and co-educational schools, and according to Smith 2013, schools where violence occurs most are co-educational school. Stromquist 2007 argued that the school socialization into gender roles results in differential levels of violence among boys and girls, page 21. We also looked at violence relating to single-sex schools and a review of literature for single-sex schooling in the US by Datnow, Hubbard, and Conkus, 2001, concluded that it provided a stronger academic environment free from social distractions for both boys and girls than do co-educational settings, page 22. So what we have is that the literature actually favors single-sex schooling for peace in schools. Let us talk a little about the methodology. This was actually a multi-case study, qualitative in design. This approach was chosen because in a qualitative approach, the researcher is able to collect data that are comprehensive and therefore give a reasonable description of what is studied. And to be more specific, in the methodology, 2 single-sex schools and participants from them were selected. We also selected 2 co-educational schools and participants from them. In terms of the participants, 3 principals form the respondents, with 1 vice principal, 4 guidance counselors, and 4 classroom teachers. The classroom teachers were chosen randomly. In terms of the data collection, we used interviews as the method. All interviews were recorded, transcripts were made, the data were analyzed. Findings were interesting in that no single explanation is responsible. The contributory factors were government placement system 1. By this we mean that there is a high-stake exam that transits students from primary school in grade 6 to high school in grade 7. These students are not placed based on their addresses, but on their grades. So they don't get to go to the schools where they want to go, some of them. So they become hopeless and aggressive and fight. Number 2, the location of the schools. The single sex schools we found were placed in secluded areas. Because of this, the peace was lasting and it was easier to achieve peace because the schools were far away from the homes and could not be infiltrated easily. The sharing of space was number three. This means that males and females share the same physical space. So because they share the same physical space, the mixed sexes and the multi-personalities make situations more complex. In other words, the causes in some cases for all schools were the same. But in terms of the co-educational schools, the causes now become more sensitive and more potent because of the sharing of space. Drugs came in at number 4. Marijuana. When students smoke like marijuana, the guidance counselors would say they become aggressive. And through that aggression, we have fight. They would fight easily. On screen right now is a flow chart of the secluded location. What the secluded location does is to create this physical environment that would generate a social environment, and then that social environment results in a psychological environment, meaning that because the school is so well placed physically, the social environment among the students are very positive, and the psychological environment now means that they become mentally and emotionally conformed. So even if they used to fight in primary school, having come to the high school in the single sex schools, they conform and have peace. And then number 5 was the absentee fathers. This was a surprise one. We didn't expect this. The guidance counselors say when they spoke with the students who fight, these students said that they wanted their fathers at home. So because they were grown by a mother and needed their fathers, they became aggressive. Number 6, illiteracy. Educators believe that when students cannot read and write well, they lack reasoning ability. And because they lack the ability to reason, then they respond with fighting and aggression. Number 7, rather, verbal interaction among students was a big one. This is really the trigger of the fights in school. 2 main things were noticed. One, any reference to sexuality that was derogatory or taboo. For example, if a boy called or referred to another boy as Batman, which is a homosexual in Jamaica, that is a trigger for a fight. A fight will ensue once that is done. Or any reference to the mother. Right? A boy is so protective of his mother that even if the boy who made the comment about his mother is afraid of that boy, he's still going to fight him because he's so protective of his mother. And then in terms of the behavioral interactions among students, which came in at number 8, there is something called the last lick. It's a culture with Jamaican children, meaning no student is willing to take the last blow. So they will fight until they're being parted by someone, because no one is going to take the last blow, what they refer to as the last lick. And then jealousy. Jealousy was a real big one, especially for co-educational schools where students share the same physical space. This research is really a qualitative research, not quantitative. So we do not deal or place a lot of emphasis on numbers, figures and percentages. However, if we should use percentage for uh, jealousy, for example, you would find that 75% of instructional leaders believe that jealousy was the signature cause for violence in schools, while only 25% felt that cell phone was the major challenge. So the result then is that the environment was quintessential to having schools with minimal violence. The causes were basically the same for all schools. However, those causes became more sensitive and more potent in co-educational schools because of space sharing. The environment started with the location of the school, which is in a secluded area, and so the environment became threefold. It was physical, it was social, as well as psychological. I put all of them together and I term the environment as the psychosocial environment. Now, it is time to say thank you to the chairpersons today, the members of the committee, Dr. Judith Stull, my chairperson, Dr. Samuel Myers, Dr. Piché Kurilov, and up there is the last of my temple owl doing the last duty. Come on, temple owl, just wave to everybody, say thank you. That's right, okay, thank you. All right.
There were a number of variables, Amos, that played a vital role in your research. I just wanted to ask you, though, school type figured as a very important variable. But what about gender?
All right. One of the things, as I mentioned, that was done was that we selected two types of single-sex schools, one boy and one girl, one all girls, one all boys. In that way, we struck an equilibrium. So we create that balance to say that it is not really the gender. What obtains in a single-sex schools, in a girls' school, is the same thing we found in a boys' school. So the causes were the same with the same student, and gender did not affect it that much.
School location, was that an important factor?
School location was a big one because we found that the schools that were situated in the secluded areas, the parents or members of the family, relatives or friends could not infiltrate those schools or penetrate those schools easily. We found that the schools that were were in the urban areas. A child could get in a fight, that child could leave the compound, go and call their parents from the market or from where they were to come and assist in the fight. That could not take place in the single-sex setting.
That's very interesting. So those variables like school type, gender, location are very important variables. They refer to them in the research as moderator variables. But one thing I want to point out to you, though, is that it seems that this variable, you made reference to it. I think it has to do with father absenteeism.
Yeah.
It's surprising that played such a significant role.
Yes, yes. The guidance counselors really had this to say. They said that the students they spoke with, the ones who got into fights, they said they wanted their fathers at home. So it was a case where they were actually being raised by a mother, and they wanted their father. So they were miserable and aggressive at school. Very interesting information that I came up to.
Whether this school was rural, urban, do you think that the leadership had anything to do with it? For example, in instances where the principal was, say, a female or a male, what would you say? Was that an impelling factor?
It probably was a factor, but it did not play out in this research. I tell you what, for the all-boys school, the principal was a male, and for the all-girls school, the principal was a female. So again, this research sort of lends itself to future research. So that is another question that we could raise to study in the future as far as violence in school is concerned.
That's good. Very interesting. Interesting. Well, very good. Now you can say to yourself, sorrow vanquished, labor ended, Jordan passed.
Thank you very much, Doc.